Alright, we're going to begin with about a cup of breadcrumbs, along with 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning. You could use panko breadcrumbs or regular breadcrumbs. I'm using panko because that's what I had on hand. We're going to grate up about a half a cup of Parmigiano-Reggiano cheese and add that to the party. You could use Asiago cheese here if you wanted to, but you definitely want something that's got a nice, strong, umami, cheesy, salty punch to it. Go ahead and get all that mixed together and bring on the beef. I'm using thinly sliced top round. You could use thinly sliced bottom round as well. Go ahead and lay your beef slice down one at a time and season this lightly with salt. It's a very thin piece of meat and the cheese has a lot of salt in it as well, so you don't need too much. Lay down a tablespoon or 2 of your breadcrumb filling, basically just a light covering over the entire piece of meat, and then tightly and gently roll it up on top of itself, like a fruit roll up but with beef. Go ahead and make sure that bottom side is sealed up, and rinse and repeat with your remaining slices. I think I'm doing about 6 here. Once you've got them all rolled up, you'll need to secure them so they do not unravel while cooking. So for that, I'm using a couple of pieces of twine or string on each one. Just give that a couple of overhand knots. You could use toothpicks as well. Whatever you have on hand will work. You want to go about 1 inch from each end. So 1 on the one side, 1 on the other side. And you're going to want to go ahead and cut off that excess string there. That's just going to get in the way in the pan, burn, soak up your sauce, so forth and so on. Next up, give the business to a white onion. If it's large like this one, you probably will only need about half. And add 2 tablespoons of olive oil to a skillet over medium-high heat. And we will begin to sear our braciole. These can also be called Involtini, which is actually the more correct term. Braciole is usually a larger roast, but there's not a lot of name recognition for Involtini online in recipes, so went ahead and called this braciole. Once you've got some nice color on that first side, some good golden brown crustification happening, you can go ahead and flip them over, start to work on getting some color on that second side. After a couple of minutes, we can also go ahead and begin to add our onions here and let them begin to sweat and get a little bit of color in that oil and rendering beef fat. It looks like a lot of onions, but they do cook down in the sauce because this is going to be simmered low and slow for roughly 1 hour to 1.5 hours, depending on how large your pieces of beef are. Once those onions start to soften a bit, I'm going in with a couple of cloves of minced garlic. I'm using the jarlic, as I call it, from the fridge because I didn't feel like chopping any up, but fresh garlic would be great too. Go ahead and give that a stir so that that garlic begins to soften. And then we're going to add about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of red wine. I'm using a Cabernet Sauvignon here. And you want to use that liquid to really deglaze all of that beautiful fond that we built up on the bottom of our pan. Stir everything so that it is well combined. Since we've added some other ingredients here, I'm going to add some extra salt. Also season it with some cracked black pepper. Shake on an extra teaspoon or so of Italian seasoning. And then we'll bring the tomato element to the dish. You could use tomato sauce here, tomato puree, but I like a little bit of a chunkier texture, especially since, again, this is going to be cooked down low and slow. So that's 1 28-ounce can of chopped or crushed tomatoes. Stir that so that everything is thoroughly combined. Turn your heat down to medium low or low so that it just barely maintains a simmer. Put the lid on and let it roll for about 1 hour. We can now move on to making our cauliflower mash, or what's more accurately a cauliflower puree, but that sounds a little too fancy for this rustic dish. Begin by cutting the core off the bottom of the head of cauliflower, or that stem. Remove any very fibrous green leaves from the outside, and then just go ahead and begin to break the cauliflower down into large chunks or florets. We're going to roast these in the oven, but the more even they are in size, as always, the more even they are going to cook. This is 1 whole head of cauliflower here. Makes enough for 3 to 4 people, depending on how hungry they are. Once we've gotten that cauliflower broken down and into a bowl, add in 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, a generous seasoning of kosher salt, and a generous cracking of black pepper, and then just toss that to combine. That's going to go onto a baking tray, which will go in a 425-degree oven for 25 to 35 minutes, or until the cauliflower has just begun to brown around the outside and is fork or knife tender. Looks like that. Again, it's going to depend on what size you cut your florets into. Once it looks like that, however, we are going to grate over some fresh nutmeg, being sure to drop that nutmeg onto the really hot pan, carefully retrieve it, and continue to grate. This is optional, but I love the flavor of fresh nutmeg in any kind of mashed vegetable dish. Add your cauliflower to a food processor or blender, and we're going to go in with 1 can of full-fat coconut milk, which I have warmed up in the microwave so that it does not bring the temperature of our cauliflower down too quickly. I'm adding it just a little bit at a time because you never know exactly how much you're going to need. I ended up using about 3/4 of a 16-ounce can. You're going for the consistency or texture of like a mashed potato here, but if you like it a little smoother or a little chunkier, of course, that's just you cooking. With that aside, it's time to go back and check on our braciole, which are braising away. It's been about an hour here, and they are nice and tender. That sauce is really well combined and cooked down slightly. Go ahead and give everything a stir, and oh man, that just looks wonderful. You know that's going to taste like it's been cooking all day, even though it's only been about an hour. For a little final flavor bomb here, I like to add in some fresh basil, and then cook this out for another 10 to 15 minutes with the lid off so that sauce thickens up slightly. To plate this up, we're going to put a couple of dollops of our cauliflower puree or mash down on a plate and make a nice little bed to tuck our braciole into. Go ahead and you could probably call 2 of these a serving, but I'm just going to start off with 1 for now. Spoon over a little bit of that beautiful tomato and wine sauce. Make sure to make an absolute mess of the plate. Let me clean that up. And then, you know, I got to garnish it. Green onions would be my typical move, but I had some fresh flat leaf parsley in the fridge, so I chopped a little bit of that up. And to ever gild the lily, we will go down with a little bit of freshly grated Parmigiano-Reggiano right on top. So there it is, your braciole in red wine and tomato sauce over cauliflower mash. Now this dish definitely takes a little bit of time to prepare, but it is relatively simple and straightforward overall. That beef is very unctuous and flavorful because it comes from a cut of meat that has a very beefy flavor. Those breadcrumbs and cheese on the inside kept everything nice and moist and really add a lot of flavor to the dish. That nice bright cheese, creamy breadcrumbs, creamy cauliflower, and that tangy acidic tomato sauce with the red wine layers in there. It's a really awesome bite of food, a really awesome dish to make for friends or family, and I hope you'll give it a try. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and come back for more content in the future. Now get out of here and go make something delicious.